promise, vow, oath, blood oath, pinky promise. The one thing all these have in common is that they should be taken seriously and not be broken. Well, that's exactly what Kratos does in this game when he is supposed to serve his lord, Ares. Today, we're going to take a look at the beginning of Kratos' story, which led him down a path that brought him nothing but anger and death of countless people. This story takes place at two separate times. One set in the past 3 weeks before the current events, and the present day where the game starts. It starts off with Gaia explaining how Kratos got into the situation he's currently in, being chained up by his own blades. This is when you are introduced to Megara, one of the sisters of the Furies, who are servants of Ares and are after Kratos for breaking his oath with Ares. After breaking free and chasing Megara through this awesome opening sequence with fantastic action set pieces, you kill her and the story jumps to 3 weeks in the past. Kratos is at home trying to collect his thoughts when he goes to grab for his daughter's necklace and it disappears. And he hears a voice. This is when we're introduced to Orcos, a mysterious entity who wants to help Kratos break his oath with Ares. Orcos shows Kratos that his mind is being messed with by the Furies and that he is in an illusion. Orcos tells Kratos that he can help him break free from his bond with Ares, but first he needs to keep his mind clear and go to Delphi and speak to the Oracle. When Kratos gets to Delphi to talk to the Oracle, he is stopped by Castor and Pollux, and they tell Kratos that he needs to make an offer to see the Oracle. Kratos, being Kratos, says go to hell, and Castor and Pollux doesn't take that well and challenge Kratos. During the battle, the place starts to crumble. While Kratos was successful in taking out Castor and Pollux, the Oracle got caught up in the battle because she was asleep and got crushed by some debris from the waist down. When Kratos gets to her, she tells him that Orcos really is an ally of Kratos and he wants to help him. Also, that the way for him to break free from the illusion of the Furies, he needs to go get the Eye of Truth that is in the Lantern of Delos. To get to the Eye of Truth, Kratos must take a boat, and this is when we get Orcos' motivation for helping Kratos and his backstory. What Orcos tells Kratos is that he is the son of Ares and the Furies queen Methough, and they had Orcos to be the ultimate warrior. Ares wanted to take Zeus and Olympus down, but Orcos was too weak, so Kratos was chosen instead. And Orcos' role was to hold the bonds that Kratos and many others had made. Kratos goes off on Orcos for just now telling him all of this and tells him he doesn't need his help, and Orcos leaves. Eventually, Kratos fights the Furies and thinks that he's killed another one, but ends up getting captured. But Orcos steps in and saves him, and this is when the Furies find out that Orcos is helping Kratos. Eventually, Kratos makes his way to the Eye of Truth, where the Furies have already gotten the Eye of Truth and captured Orcos. Then they capture Kratos, which brings us back to the beginning of the game. Kratos finally defeats the Furies and is free from their mind control and their illusions. When Kratos talks to Orcos after everything is done, Orcos tells Kratos that before he killed the Furies, they put Kratos and Ares' bond in him. So the only way Kratos can truly be free from Ares' bond is to kill him, and reluctantly Kratos does, and gives him a proper burial. This is where Kratos' rage-fueled and bloody journey for revenge against Ares begins. So despite this being a somewhat interesting prequel, if you want to call it that, it honestly doesn't need to exist. And here's why. The first game explains everything perfectly. Kratos called upon Ares for his powers and Ares gave it to him. Ares wanted to make the ultimate warrior, so he had Kratos kill his family. Kratos wanted revenge for what Ares did, and he got it. All this stuff with Orcos and the Furies is unnecessary in the grand scheme of things, even with the context. The bouncing back and forth between the past and the present doesn't help either. It makes the story seem a bit disjointed, or at least to me it does. The Furies bring nothing of any significance to the overall plot besides the new bad guy of the week because they're associated with Ares. Also, I think them saying that the Furies had something to do with Kratos killing his family is a cop-out. So when out of nowhere you're saying that the Furies might have had Kratos under some illusion is a cop-out and whack. With that being said, I think Orkos is easily one of the best characters in the franchise. The genuine amount of remorse that he has for Kratos and his situation and what he could have done to prevent it, that he is willing to betray his family for Kratos to get revenge for what the Furies and Ares did to him and his family. Orkos was a true friend of Kratos, even when Kratos thought he wasn't. That makes me wish that this would have had a different story than what we got. Imagine if this story took place during those 3 tasks. Throughout that time, you could have had Orkos pop up trying to warn Kratos that what he's doing is wrong, that he's being manipulated by Ares, but Kratos, drunk off power, doesn't listen, which leads into what we see in God of War 1. I know that's not the best story. I could come up with a better one if I really wanted to, but my point is that Orkos was a solid character. More could have been done with him instead of what we got. The visuals of this game are surprisingly good despite this being a filler and cash grab. At the same time, it came out 3 years after God of War 3, so I'm pretty sure they took a lot of the stuff that they learned developing that and applied it here. Even with that, a lot of the locations have varying levels of detail, to being old and worn out to being overly polished and clean. Same thing goes for the enemies. Even if it is 5 different enemies repurposed with different skins, or at least that's how I feel. Speaking of enemies, let's talk about some of them. This game easily has some of the most bullshit enemies I've ever fought in video games. Honestly, the whole series does, but by far these are the worst. Starting off with the satyrs, at least that's how I think you pronounce it. These goat dudes, and I don't mean the greatest of all time because they're the exact opposite of that. I don't know if it's because I was playing on hard, and even if it is, it's still bullshit. The timing on these enemies' attacks are so fast and have so little cooldown that when there's more than 4 on the screen, which is most of the time, you're just bombarded by attacks constantly, and the only thing you can do is block. It's just pure rage inducing, especially when they put them in the most arbitrary spots like this right here. The Gorgons are every bit as bad because all they do is constantly grab you. You have to play this mini game in order to escape. They also love trying to turn you into stone so you can get hit by their tail and die. So when there's more than one, it just becomes aggravating. It honestly just starts to become overwhelming and headache inducing. Elephantors is another one that'll get your blood boiling. Their main thing is charging at you and also charging at you. They also carry weapons, so they have some range on them. So your best bet is to hit them and run because anything more results in death. When you have enemies with fast attacks and enemies with projectiles flying everywhere, it's no longer fun after a while. Also, most of the enemies become invincible after a few hits for no reason, which leads into them just straight up going through your attacks as you're attacking them. You know, because the controller doesn't vibrate. So the gameplay devolves into hitting them 3 times, then block and repeat and repeat and repeat. And it's just not fun. All my complaints can be attributed to the fact that I was playing on hard off the bat. Even then, I think that stuff shouldn't matter, but that's a different discussion for a different day. The combat in this game is fairly basic. Square is light attack, triangle is heavy attack, and R1 is grab and throws, which is different from the other games where circle is grab. The combos consist of hitting square 3 times, or hitting square 5 times, or hitting square twice, followed by hitting triangle once, or pressing triangle 3 times, and hitting square twice, and hitting triangle twice and square once. When you grab an enemy with R1, you can attack another enemy at the same time or sling the enemy you're holding into other enemies. R1 triangle is the best move in the game and will save you on higher difficulties. Mainly it stuns anything around the impact. This is extremely useful when you want to get a group of enemies off your back. R1 square and R1 triangle are also special moves that have different effects and attacks depending on the elements. There are 4 elements you obtain throughout the story. The first one being Fire of Ares. Its best attribute is R2, where Kratos makes a huge explosion. The next one is Ice of Poseidon. Its best attribute is R2 as well. The next one is Lightning of Zeus. It's the weakest one of them all in my opinion. Last but not least, the star of the show in all of these games is Soul of Hades. This move in all the games are lifesavers, and this game is no exception. R2 is an AoE that summons these giant arms to come out the ground and hit everything. This is essential in this game on higher difficulties. It's so good for crowd control and it hits enemies multiple times, which once again helps a lot on higher difficulties. Make sure you max out this ability once you obtain it, because trust me, it will be your go-to. The first item you get is the Amulet of Ouroboros. This gives you the ability to put an enemy in slow motion. The last item you get is the Oath Stone of Orcos. Stone of Orcos creates a clone of Kratos that teleports across the arena, attacking different enemies. When you upgrade it, it does more damage. It also lasts longer as well, which once again helps out on higher difficulties. L3 and R3 activates Rage Mode, and it doesn't change the tide of battles as much as I was hoping. Your magic attacks do more. You can also pick up other weapons from enemies and use them. The weapons can range from a javelin to a sword to a shield and a couple of other ones. Surprisingly, a lot of these moves do not appear in any other God of War game from what I can remember. Overall, the combat is okay. It's no God of War 3 when it comes to depth and variety, but it's adequate enough. All in all, Ascension is definitely not the best God of War game, but I'm not going to outright call it trash either. It just seems like they wanted to bank on the God of War name one more time before they shelved it and just kind of scrounge some shit together. You can tell the more you play the game and the more the story unfolds, which is why for me, and let me repeat, for me, it's the worst one out of all the games. And this one, I'll never return to.